funny.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Morning Mayhem. It's your boy Chris, and just an update from last week. As I spoke to you guys, I was actually about to leave out of town to go to the Blue Ridge Film Festival. So the wife and I did have a great trip out to the Blue Ridge Mountains, where my film played along several other great films, and we really enjoyed ourselves, and walked away with the Audience Choice Award for my film, What the Devil Said. So if anybody checked it out last week at the link that was in the description there, it was only for last weekend. Thank you for watching. Thank you for voting. If you voted, it means a lot, so I appreciate it. In fact, another film that I worked on, I was a co-writer on it and cinematographer on it. It's going to be available this weekend for 24 hours only, starting on Saturday evening at 5 p.m. I will put the link for that in the show notes below as well, so you can watch that if you want to. So today's going to be a really a different kind of show. Instead of having 4 or 5 different topics we're going to go over, it's really just going to be one, and that is going to be a review of the State of the Union address. So what I've done is I've actually gone through and clip by clip broke down several individual portions of the State of the Union address so we can talk about them. We've got some articles we're going to pull up. As per usual, any articles I use, the links will be in the description below in the show notes, so you can go check those out and make sure I'm not skipping around and just making things sound better than they actually are, or worse than they actually are. Unlike the mainstream media, I want to be transparent with you, so you can go check those out. But a little less of that, a little bit more of the videos and some commentary. I am not a political analyst per se. I'm also not a doctor or a scientist, but some of the things that we know about COVID now, or the CDC is saying now, or the Biden administration is saying now, are the same things that I have said and other independent content creators have said for months, if not well over a year. So it's interesting to see that, given the freedom to look up things and research things, that we can actually, come to our own understanding of things and come to our own conclusion as to what's real, what isn't, what's, manipulation and what's real. And I suggest that you always do your own research as well. I know Brian Stelter hates that phrase, to do your own research, but I think it pays off. Before we jump into the State of the Union, though, I will do a quick COVID update, because that does have a little bit to do. Not only does it get mentioned in the State of the Union address, but it has a little bit to do with some things going on. So let's take a look at that real quick. All right, first up is this site. It's Trial Site News, and it quotes Bill Gates. It says, Omicron is a vaccine. Bill Gates, co-founder of Microsoft and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and a major investor in vaccine and surveillance technologies, on Friday acknowledged to attendees of Germany's annual Munich Security Conference that natural immunity provides powerful protection against coronavirus, and that Omicron has exceeded the ability of vaccines to confer that protection to a large swath of humanity. Sadly, the virus itself, particularly the variant Omicron, is a type of vaccine. That is, it creates both B cell and T cell immunity, Gates said, and it's done a better job of getting out to the world population than we have with the vaccines. Well, that's kind of a dig, a little bit of I think people being vaccine hesitant, maybe. It's also at the same time pointing out the same thing that a lot of us have said, is that, that natural immunity is significantly better traditionally than these vaccines are. And these vaccines are mRNA vaccines, which are still, I guess fairly new in how they're being deployed. So, how true of a vaccine they are is questionable, how effective they are overall. But, getting it and getting that natural immunity is just far and away significantly better. Omicron was probably, and I've said this before, Omicron was probably the best thing to happen with people getting it. High, high, man, I can't even think of the word right now. Not contamination, but infection rate. There we go. A high infection rate, right? But very few symptoms, low hospitalization, very low deaths, if any. I think there might have been some. But of course, those, as we've talked about before, often had some underlying causes as well. But yeah, so we've talked before about how Omicron is just an incredible thing, and I it's weird to say that a strain of a virus is a blessing, but it really is. It pushes us closer to herd immunity. It gives us that natural immunity that needs to be out there. And just, all right. So I've spoken about it. Joe Rogan's spoken about it. Steven Crowder, crap ton of doctors that have said the same thing. But they have been silenced, canceled, or otherwise shunned. But now, because Bill Gates is saying it and the CDC is starting to kind of change their tone, it's okay. Again, there's a difference between just taking the word of the federal government and their people or organizations, which the CDC is very much so one, and going out and doing your own research, seeking the knowledge, seeking the education, listening to what other doctors are saying. Fauci has been saying the same thing for a long time, while others have disputed that, and they've been canceled, kicked off of YouTube, Twitter, whatever. Even got calls for Joe to get canceled because of having a couple of the doctors on there that disputed it. So it's really, really imperative, I think, especially in this culture war where you have to side one way or the other, and it's left versus right, and it's up versus down, and if you don't buy into it, you're shunned and you're outcast. And it's really weird. And again, I'm going to do a show at some point that goes over words and how words have changed. But used to be, that was what woke was. Woke was being awake and aware of things that were happening, and getting outside the matrix, basically, and seeing how things were working, the inner workings of, these crazy things in the world. Whereas now woke means something completely different. And again, we'll get on that at another time. But yeah, it's past time to start reading these articles and start doing your own research and looking into things if you hadn't already. Let's take a look at another one while we're here. So from Science News, says how to interpret the CDC's new mask guidelines. Says one moment, Cale County in Wyoming's northeastern corner was an area high levels of transmission of coronavirus, a scenario in which U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends that everyone wear a mask indoors in public places. In the space of a breath, that county got the green light from the CDC that everyone could remove their masks. Why is that? Well, initially, the CDC's old metrics relied on only case counts to determine COVID-19 transmission risk in a community. As a result, much of the country was in a high or substantial levels. Counties with 100 cases or more per 100,000 people, or 10% or more positive tests, were considered high transmission risk, with lower figures indicating substantial, moderate, yada, yada, yada. Now, with the new guidelines, CDC shifted focus to the levels of severe disease. Case counts are just one of the three numbers used to calculate risk now, instead of being the end-all be-all. The new metrics raise case thresholds for wearing masks and other precautions to 200 weekly cases per 100,000 people. Below that level of cases now considered low risk. Yada, yada, yada. Basically, and this is what I get from it, basically, when Biden took over, they started reporting the COVID numbers differently than they did under Trump. Under Trump, it was how many people were catching COVID, and they had their little tickers over there, on the side, where we had, like on the side over here, something like that. It was like CNN and stuff, tracking what the infection rates of COVID-19 were, and they were going up and up and up and up because it's so infectious, right? Well, that number went up and up and up and up, especially with the more infectious Omicron or even Delta under Biden. They started reporting it differently, though. Instead of reporting the infections, they started reporting things like hospitalizations or deaths. and it made the numbers look less severe. Well, not only that, but I think it made it more transparent to the American people that it was significantly less severe. So eventually, I think the CDC had to, catch up and start changing the way that they were doing some of the metrics too, so that way the American people wouldn't say, well, if the infection rate is high, but the we're not getting in the hospital, we're not dying, why are we still wearing all these masks? Is the vaccines aren't really helping that much? Why are we still getting the vaccine? So more on that to come. I'm sure that'll change, but we see here that the masks changed. Now, I know I'm still going over the COVID and the CDC and all this stuff. Like I said, it does have something to do with the State of the Union. So let's take a look at this article. So from The Hill, House lifting mask mandates ahead of the State of the Union address. So there's good old Pelosi. That's one I just, and she was a huge advocate for the mask on the House floor, and in fact mandated it. I think they were fining people for not wearing masks. I want to say Marjorie Taylor Greene and someone else. I want to say it was on the Timcast IRL. They were talking about that and how they were getting fined and over and over and over again for not wearing their mask, even though the science didn't support it. Well, has the science changed? Why all of a sudden the night before the State of the Union address is Nancy removing that mandate? It says the House is lifting its mask mandate ahead of President Biden's State of the Union address this week, making mask wearing optional throughout the Capitol complex. In a letter on Sunday, Capitol physician Brian Monahan shared the change with the lawmakers returning to Washington this week. Individuals may choose to mask at any time, but it is no longer a requirement, he wrote. Monahan said positive COVID-19 test rates at the Capitol are down to 2.7% in the last 2 weeks, below the current rate for the D.C. metropolitan area. Washington, D.C. area is a green level according to Centers for Disease Control and Prevention metrics, meaning that COVID-19 transmission is low. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi had largely deferred to Monahan on COVID-19 measures to the House floor. A number of Republican lawmakers have repeatedly flouted the House mask mandate, incurring mounting fines, like we were just talking about. Let's see, recently Hal Rogers apologized, Representative Joyce Beatty. We already talked about that one in another episode, so I won't dive into that, but let's stick with it and talk about Pelosi a little bit more. Also from The Hill, she said Pelosi says she won't be wearing a mask for the State of the Union. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she won't wear a mask during President Biden's State of the Union address Tuesday night, following a rule change that relaxed mask mandates in the House chamber. During an appearance on MSNBC's Andrea Mitchell reports, Pelosi said host Andrea Mitchell that she told host Andrea Mitchell that she won't be wearing a mask and will use my own judgment when it comes to wearing a mask going forward. Using her own judgment. So she's not for the mandates either, apparently. So that's kind of funny. And it goes on and on. And it kind of says the same thing. But yeah, for someone to be so diehard and so pro masks to now say, oh, I'll use my own judgment now on wearing masks or not. So just really interesting to see all that come about. So let's get into the State of the Union address. Again, going to play some clips. I'll try to take clip by clip. I don't think I'm really worried about copyright claims too much. I did pull this one from C-SPAN, so I don't know if they're going to really be on the copyright claim trail anyway. But I do have it broken up, and we'll take it piece by piece. And again, guys, I know this is going to be a long show. I don't know if I'm really going to have any breakdowns that I release, the nuggets that I release throughout the week. So I would say that this is going to be a good one to watch. It'll probably be one of the more in-depth evaluations of it, pointing out some things that you probably aren't getting from mainstream media or even other independent content creators. And I do recommend watching reviews and rebuttals and, commentary from as many independent content creators that you can, that you trust, because we're all going to have different perspectives on it. We're all going to find different things right with it, wrong with it, relatable to past presidents, as we'll see. And so I do highly recommend that, because I do think it's important to get that information and not just rely on what the narrative is, what the mainstream media want you to think, because as soon as that State of the Union ended, certain channels were just praising him for such a great job, while others weren't. So not only do you get to see the clips and kind of get to make your own mind up instead of watching the entire thing in full, but you get my commentary as well, which you may or may not want. Well, let's go ahead and start off with a clip or two.
6 days ago, Russia's Vladimir Putin sought to shake the very foundations of the free world, thinking he could make it bend to his menacing ways. But he badly miscalculated. He thought he could roll into Ukraine and the world would roll over. Instead, he met with a wall of strength he never anticipated or imagined. He met the Ukrainian people.
All right, so a couple of things with that very first clip. One, that's just the beginning of some of his flubs, we'll call them. And who am I to say anything? I flub all the time. I'm reading off his stuff. I'm flubbing. I mean, yes, he should be more polished than I am reading a script, writing the script, helping write the script. I don't know. But being, given that information and kind of knowing it a little bit and having probably some courses and classes on how to do all that public speaking stuff. I'm not too bad at it myself, but I have little flubs here and there. Problem I do have, and the concern I have, is when, and he does do this. I don't know if I've got the clip of it, but he does flub saying things like, instead of Ukrainian, he says Iranian or Uranian, I guess, or just saying the wrong country sometimes when he's talking about a country. And those kind of things are a little bit alarming, especially when talking to other countries about, very severe situations that could be impactful to other countries, us or whoever. It's very important to nail down the correct country that you're talking about. So those are the ones that really bother me. And I know I give him, crap about his gaffes and all this and that. And he does have a lot of gaffes, but the little flubs like that, other people are going to tear him apart. I'm not going to give him such a big, hard time about it. See, look, I just did it. I'm not going to give him such a hard time about it because I don't know. I'm not a jerk. I'm not going to do that. They're funny, I guess, a little bit, but they're a little worrisome, maybe. I don't know. But I think most people make flubs, especially, doing a public speaking event like that and reading off the teleprompters like his. And I mean, his eyes are almost closed because he's squinting so hard. So, I don't know what his eyesight's like. I just know that I'm not going to bash him over the head with it. But aside from that, he kicks off the State of the Union address by talking about Russia and Ukraine. Don't really have a problem with that either. But he does go on and on about Russia and Ukraine for a while. Again, I know that's big, but this being the State of the Union, very, very little of it actually had anything to do with us. It was all about like that one. It was, Putin was wrong. He didn't know he's going to run into the Ukrainians like he did. And everybody applauded. And good for them. I'm happy that they're fighting back, and that's great. And I don't have a dog in the fight, really. I think it's terrible that countries are invading other countries at this day and age, but at the same time, I don't have a dog in the fight. Another thing that's funny to me is that I'm sure most of those people that had no idea what the Ukrainian flag looked like, and now everybody just about is wearing either a Ukrainian flag or Ukrainian flag colors, sitting there for the State of the Union. And I would imagine, and I thought about this when I was watching it, there's not a lot of American pride and, patriotism with a certain party. And I'm pretty sure they're all the ones, wearing more of the Ukrainian stuff, even more than they do the American flag pins or lapels or whatever, probably. So that's kind of funny to me that they're doing that. It's maybe some of it is legit. Maybe some of it's for show. I don't know. But yeah, again, this State of the Union, our union, we're not in this war, this conflict or whatever. So it's really not super duper applicable to us, even though he does make some points of where we are involved in supporting the NATO countries and stuff like that. But we'll get into some of that. But I did want to say he does talk about this for quite a bit, the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. So if I'm skipping around a little bit, it's just, I kind of feel like some of it's not necessarily. Let's go back and look at some more.
To all Americans, I'll be honest with you, as I always promised I would be.
I know that was a short one, but I just thought it was funny. politicians saying they're being honest.
And I'm taking robust action to make sure the pain of our sanctions is targeted at Russian economy and that we use every tool at our disposal to protect American businesses and consumers. Tonight, I can announce the United States has worked with 30 other countries to release 60 million barrels of oil from reserves around the world. America will lead that effort, releasing 30 million barrels of our own strategic petroleum reserve. And we stand ready to do more if necessary, united with our allies.
All right, so a few takeaways from that one. Penalizing them with the oil, that's probably one of the biggest things to do. We talked about last week how, first day in office, Biden's eliminating drilling in the U.S. and, canceling the Keystone Pipeline. And then later on, he approves the Nord Stream 2, which, helps out Russia financially with oil, whatever. And here we are saying, well, we're going to pull back and we're not going to get as much oil from them. Which, hey, good move. Don't get me wrong. Good move. But why don't we, start drilling here again like we were? I mean, we were energy, independent as far as that goes under Trump. And Biden came in and just went, to all of that stuff. So it poses a couple of questions. One, where do we get a lot of our oil from? Let's take a look at this article here from U.S. News. It says, where does the U.S. get its oil? Russia's invasion of Ukraine has sparked international condemnation, with heavy sanctions imposed by the West aiming to isolate the country economically. Russia's gross domestic product is driven by its energy sector, which has largely been spared the financial penalties. See, there I go. It supplies around 40% of Europe's natural gas, and while Moscow has said it will continue to deliver gas to the market, concerns remain about the supply and prices. A big reason for that is, yes, a lot of that oil is going into Moscow, but I mean, a lot of the funds, all the funds are going into, Putin and the military. I mean, we're funding all this stuff by continuing to buy the oil, right? Let's jump on down here. Of the 7.86 million barrels per day the U.S. imported in 2020, the majority came from its North American neighbors, Canada, with 4.13 million barrels at 52.5%, and Mexico with 750,000, 9.6%. But imports coming from outside North America are significant. Russia with 540,000 barrels a day, 6.6%, was the top non-continental contributor. Roughly 11% of the imports came collectively from OPEC countries, including 520,000 from Saudi Arabia. So, I mean, it can be said that we already have dealings with some shady countries with the oil, and that's very true. And I'm all about cutting ties from them. I'm about Europe cutting ties from them. That's one of the best ways to hit them is with that oil. And again, we can be energy independent. Another thing that he said in the little clip there is they were releasing, what was it? He said 60 million barrels plus another 30 from our reserve. So that's like 90 million barrels, right? Well, statistically here, we're looking at about a little over 20 million barrels a day that we use in oil. So if they're releasing a whole 90 million, that's going to give us a whole 4.5 days relief. I know the idea is not to give us free gas for 4.5 days, is to bring down the price. That's not going to be enough. There's not going to be a noticeable impact. And again, all these links are going to be in the show notes so you can, read more about all this. That's not going to be enough for you to have a noticeable drop in price to alleviate some of the pain at the pump. You're going to have to do more than that. It's going to have to be more than 90 million barrels. We're going to have to open up our own reserves again. We're going to have to open up, not our reserves, but, start drilling again. He's got to make some moves. Let's see. All right, let's watch some more.
Unlike the $2 trillion tax cut passed in the previous administration that benefited the top 1% of Americans, the American Rescue Plan helped working people and left no one behind. Folks, And it worked. It worked.
All right, first of all, I gotta say, what the hell was Schumer doing? Right? What was that? Interesting enough that he would do that as the camera was on him. I feel like that's kind of like those reality TV shows where somebody's driving somewhere and there's already a camera person at that next location, just happens to be there, and like they knew they were coming or something. Makes you really wonder how much of all this is scripted. You know, how much of, you know, sit for this, stand for that, clap for that. So we're going to see another malfunction later. There's probably a few in there overall, but there's two big ones. So that was one. So Chuck Schumer, that was fun. That was really interesting. But let's take a look at this little article right here from Fox Business. It says State of the Union fact check. Did Trump tax cuts help the top 1% and not working people, as Biden said? President Biden claimed that Republican tax cuts that former President Trump signed in 2017 benefited the top 1% of Americans, but not working people, unlike his American Rescue Plan. But various studies on tax cuts tell a far different story. Unlike the $2 trillion tax cut passed in the previous administration that benefited the top 1% of Americans, the American Rescue Plan, Biden said during his State of the Union address Tuesday, the American Rescue Plan helped working people and left no one behind, and it worked. Yet, multiple studies found that the Tax Cuts and Job Acts of 2017 benefited a broad swath of Americans. The Tax Policy Center estimated that 82% of middle-income Americans would receive a tax cut for an average reduction of $1,260 in individual income taxes in 2018, increasing after-tax incomes by 1.7%. According to the Treasury Department, 90% of Americans saw an increase in their take-home pay in 2018. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported a 3.3% average wage increase that year. So not only was the tax better, but the wage increase was better too. The tax cut law included opportunity zones, which led investors to put their money into distressed communities. The law also doubled the child tax credit, saving working families an estimate of $100 billion. I'm sure it goes on and on. But I will say one thing that I thought was interesting, and I can't remember which show I saw it on, but somebody pointed out that people were upset that they were not getting as much money back in their taxes under Trump. And by under tax, I mean when you file your tax at the beginning of the year, right? But the thing is that under Trump, you were bringing home more in every single paycheck. There was being less taken out. So thus there's, less to get back at the end of the year. But I didn't think that way. So instead of, having less throughout the year and then getting one big check from the government at the end of the year, or the beginning of the year, you had more every single paycheck. And that was awesome. And for those of us that realized that, knows that, took advantage of that, that was great. For those that didn't, it just went right over and they were upset at tax season. So people really don't understand, I think anyway, what tax season is all about and what all, getting that tax money back. It's your money, getting that back. It's your money that you overpaid throughout the year. So anyways, there's a whole different show that we can do on that. But you can read more from that Fox one. So let's see, let's check some more out.
We created jobs, lots of jobs. In fact, our economy created over 6.5 million new jobs just last year. More jobs in 1 year than ever before in the history of the United States of America. The economy grew at a rate of 5.7 last year, the strongest growth rate in 40 years.
All right, you remember earlier when he was saying he was going to be honest with us? Well, he's still not being honest with us, okay? We called this one out, 4 or 5 different episodes ago when Jim Psaki was talking about it. Look at this chart. So this is the chart that they came out with showing the progress on the economy. So there was a 9.4 million job loss when he came into office, basically, and they brought back 6.4 million jobs. They didn't create 6.4 million jobs. They brought back 6.4 million jobs. Some of those were probably new jobs that were created. Some of those were jobs that were coming back. But 9.4 minus 6.4 is 3. 3 million jobs are still in the hole. We still have not come back yet. So anybody that can do basic math can see if you've come back with less jobs, you have not grown the economy. You have not brought forth these new jobs. The numbers and the statistics they're using to support this high job growth are just false. They're not accurate. So again, they are using numbers to manipulate you. Yes, did the number of people going into jobs increase from one year to the next? Yes, but you got to back it up 2 years or maybe 3 years before the pandemic hit. Are these new jobs, or are these people just now going back to work? They're just now going back to work, and not all of them. We still had a 3 million deficit, and I would say it's probably more than that, as we'll see here in just a little bit. There's people that just don't want to go back to work, but let's see. Let's watch this next one then.
Put us on a path to win the economic competition of the 21st century that we face with the rest of the world, particularly China. I've told Xi Jinping it's never been a good bet to bet against the American people. We'll create good jobs for millions of Americans, modernizing roads, airports, ports, waterways, all across America. And we'll do it to withstand the devastating effects of climate change and promote environmental justice. We'll build a national network of 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations.
Okay, so first, given everything he said about the Russia-Ukraine conflict, you would think maybe he would say something about China and the potential that they have, for invading Taiwan during this time. Or maybe he would have talked a little bit more defensively against China. Basically, he's comparing our technology, their technology, our growth, our investments, and whatnot. So, nope, he just brags about charging stations. But as a throwback, how do we power the charging stations? Let's take a look at this article from The Guardian. Why electric cars are only as clean as their power supply. Let's see. Jorge Cruz was just finished his overnight shift, stacking shelves at Whole Foods in Los Altos, California, and is waiting at the bus stop outside. Like much of Silicon Valley, there's a regular flow of Tesla, BMW, Nissan, and Google electric cars that cruise past from their nearby headquarters, and Cruz rather likes them. I really wouldn't mind having an electric car, he says, though his first choice is probably a Honda or an Acura. Regardless, for now, he rides the bus. I need to save up for a car, he explains. As Cruz waits, a newly purchased Tesla zips by advertising zero emissions on its license plate. Electric cars have never been closer to the mainstream. The market pushed ahead by California subsidies for electric car buyers and a wide array of models from established car firms such as Toyota and Chevy. Tesla's focus on luxury, high-performance vehicles has also broadened their appeal. Electric cars are no longer purely an environmental statement, but a tech status symbol too. Yet, the zero emissions claim grates on some experts who have continued to argue over whether electric cars are really more environmentally friendly than gas guzzlers, once the manufacturing process for the vehicles and their batteries are taken into account. Electric cars rely on regular charging from local electricity network. The power plants providing that energy aren't emission-free, even in California. 60% of electricity came from the burning of fossil fuels in 2015, while solar and wind together made up less than 14%. 1/3 of U.S. power is generated by coal. If you remember, Hillary Clinton and Biden, a lot of them are against these, coals and fossil fuels, and they're trying to get to this clean energy. Well, how do you power the clean energy? We're still using fossil fuels to do it. Let's see, California's electric vehicles can plug into a greener grid than most regions of the world, especially China, where coal generated 72% of all power in 2014, according to an international energy agency. The U.S. gets about 1/3 of its electricity from coal-fired power, IEA says, and more than 40% of total electricity worldwide comes from the burning of coal. Yes, coal is a very prominent way to charge. I like this idea here of the solar panels. It's just unfortunate we don't get enough from that to do everything they're going to do. So we're going to move to all these electric vehicles. You got to have more chargers. More chargers require more energy, more electricity, and all that from the plants is going to come from, coal and other natural resources, at least right now. So, Biden really jumped the gun in eliminating a lot of those jobs, and I really hate that. I wish we could have done better planning or thinking ahead, maybe, before jumping that gun. Let's watch more.
4,000 projects have already been announced. Many of you have announced them in your districts. And tonight, I'm announcing that this year, we will start fixing over 65,000 miles of highway and 1,500 bridges in disrepair. And folks, when we use taxpayers' dollars to rebuild America, we're going to do it by buying America. Buy American products. Support American jobs. The federal government spends about $600 billion a year to keep this country safe and secure. There's been a law on the books for almost a century to make sure taxpayers' dollars support American jobs and businesses. Every administration, Democrat and Republican, says they'll do it, but we're actually doing it. We'll buy America to make sure everything from the deck of an aircraft carrier to the steel on highway guardrails is made in America from beginning to end. All of it. All of it.
So he talks a good talk about bringing the he's going to talk more about bringing the jobs back to America, but buying America or American, I think is what he was going for. Again, not going to give him too much of a hard time on that, but buying American, making sure he's supporting the home team, America first, buy American, support America, America first. Sounds familiar.
We are finally standing up for our workers and for our companies. In short, this order declares that American projects should be made with American goods. No longer are we going to allow foreign countries to cheat our producers and our workers out of federal contracts. Everyone in my administration will be expected to enforce every last Buy American provision on behalf of the American worker. And we are going to investigate every single trade deal that undermines these provisions. Secondly, we are going to enforce the higher American rules that are designed to protect jobs and wages of workers in the United States. We believe jobs must be offered to American workers first. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, it does. Interesting how similar those two talks, speeches, whatever, were, especially from a party that absolutely could not stand anything about Trump. But now the current president sounds, vaguely familiar in a lot of the things he says. In fact, we'll get into more things too that sound pretty similar to the old Trump. But remember, they couldn't stand him. Let's watch some more.
To compete for the jobs of the future, we also need a level playing field with China and other competitors. That's why it's so important to pass the Bipartisan Innovation Act sitting in Congress that will make record investments in emerging technologies and American manufacturing. We used to invest almost 2% of our GDP in research and development. We don't now. China is.
Love it. No notes. I think that's great. Research development. Let's get this country back going again. I'm with you, Joe. What else?
There's something happening in America. Just look around and you'll see an amazing story. The rebirth of pride that comes from stamping products made in America. The revitalization of American manufacturing. Companies are choosing to build new factories here when just a few years ago they would have gone overseas. That's what's happening. Ford is investing $11 billion in electric vehicles, creating 11,000 jobs across the country. GM is making the largest investment in its history, $7 billion to build electric vehicles, creating 4,000 jobs in Michigan. All told, 369,000 new manufacturing jobs were created in America last year alone.
But we know that numbers of jobs created last year alone is questionable if it's in the same mix as those other numbers. And like I said, there were probably a lot of new jobs created, but we still didn't fill the old ones either. So, potato, potato. We still have things, we still have a ways to go on all this. But yeah, so companies coming back to the U.S., that's awesome, right? Ford is one of them. He specifically called out Ford. Could it be we've heard this before too?
President-elect Donald Trump threatened to slap a border tax on General Motors for making some of its Chevrolet Cruze hatchbacks in Mexico. Trump tweeted, General Motors is sending Mexican-made model of Chevy Cruze to U.S. car dealers tax-free across border. Make in the USA or pay big border tax. GM made about 50,000 Cruzes in Mexico last year, according to Automotive News. In comparison, it built more than 300,000 of them in the United States. Michelle Krebs of Auto Trader.
They haven't been selling well, even though that car has gotten great reviews, and it was recently redesigned. They've recently cut back a shift there, and the hatchback is a very small percentage of that. So I don't know if it would be ultimately worth it to move it back to the U.S.
GM responded, saying, all Chevrolet Cruze sedans sold in the U.S. are built in GM's assembly plant in Lordstown, Ohio. GM builds a Chevrolet Cruze hatchback for global markets in Mexico, with a small number sold in the U.S. James Nolte of World Policy Institute says companies in other sectors are getting ready for changes.
I've already read that Apple, for example, has done a contingency study to see how much it would cost if they moved manufacturing back from China to the United States. Other companies are probably doing the same sort of thing. They're making contingency plans. What if Trump is really serious about this? How could it affect our costs? How could we reallocate production to be able to take advantage of this new environment? So a lot of companies and people are assessing Trump to see whether he's serious or whether his campaign rhetoric was hollow. And I think increasingly the evidence is he's serious.
Hours after Trump's GM tweet, Ford said it's canceling plans to build a $1.6 billion factory in Mexico and investing $700 million in a factory in Michigan. The move comes after Trump's criticism of its Mexican investment plans.
Let me be clear. I'm not trying to tear apart Joe Biden. Okay. If he is being legit and for real about what he's saying that he wants to do and wants to accomplish, a lot of this stuff I can 100% get behind. A lot of it I can get behind. I've supported it when Trump said it. I'm supporting it when Biden says it. That's different than what we're seeing on a lot of politicians. They'll stand up and give them a standing O for Biden, and they'll sit down for Trump, even though they say the exact same things. Direct evidence of that coming up, by the way. A little foreshadowing. Look out for it. But again, I'm not going to ridicule the guy at all. If this is really what he's standing for and pushing for, and if the party's going to get behind him and get with it too, I'm all about it. Let's do it.
And with all the bright spots in our economy, record job growth, higher wages, too many families are struggling to keep up with their bills. Inflation is robbing them of gains they thought otherwise they would be able to feel. I get it. That's why my top priority is getting prices under control. Look, our economy roared back faster than almost anyone predicted, but the pandemic meant that businesses had a hard time hiring enough people because of the pandemic to keep up production in their factories. So you didn't have people making those beams that went into buildings because they were out. The factory was closed. The panic also disrupted the global supply chain. Factories close. When that happens, it takes longer to make goods and get them to the warehouses, to the stores, and prices go up. Look at cars last year. 1/3 of all the inflation was because of automobile sales. There weren't enough semiconductors to make all the cars that people wanted to buy. And guess what? Prices of automobiles went way up, especially used vehicles as well. And so we have a choice. One way to fight inflation is to drive down wages and make Americans poorer. I think I have a better idea to fight inflation. Lower your costs, not your wages.
A couple of comments about that. One, proud of him for kind of knowing how the economy works. Also kind of disappointed that he doesn't understand how our economy works. in the same breath, he says the same thing, but in two different connotations. So he understands that, hey, when you don't have enough people working, you can't sell enough cars or whatever it may be, prices go up. But he doesn't feel like they should. They feel like you should lower the cost. So he understands the situation, but he doesn't understand why we get to the result that we do. So yeah, he says there's the don't lower the wages. I agree with that. Don't lower people's wages to make your ends meet. Don't raise prices. Well, if you traditionally are able to crank out, say, 1 million cars and you sell 1 million cars a day, I know that's probably a terribly off number, but just, for example, and due to whatever COVID or other, reasons that we'll get to in a second, you're only cranking out a tenth of that. Well, in order to make ends meet, pay the light bill, because you still have to run all the equipment, run all the lights and everything like that. Still have to pay the employees that show up. You may even have to pay the employees that show up a little extra, a little bonus because they're doing more work, right? You still got to, make the numbers. You still got to hit your numbers as best you can. So what are you going to do? You're going to raise the cost. This how it works. It's supply and demand. I've got a, third grader that came home telling me about supply and demand and understands economics better than several of our elected politicians. And that's great for her, but terrifying for us as a country. But was it COVID that had people really locked down? Yes, at first, but is that what made them leave the jobs? Is that what was keeping them from coming back to the jobs? Are they coming back to work? Let's look at this article here from the Daily Mail. It says, no end-in-sight labor shortage. More than half of Americans who lost their jobs during pandemic say they've no plans to return, with many saying they'll take another 6 months off. Poll finds 53% of Americans who lost jobs in pandemic aren't seeking new work. It signals the dire labor shortage will likely continue hampering the economy. Job openings remain near record highs, with 10.4 million positions open, but millions have dropped out of the labor force and don't want to work. Again, the link for this will be in the description below. But yeah, so we can boast about how good our economy is doing, but when you've got all these businesses struggling to hire and people not going back to work, what numbers are you looking at for a good economy? Okay. Some of it is, we're continuing to cut checks to people, or, through all those bailouts, or I forget what you call them, stimulus checks. There we go. That have come through, and other, government funded things. Maybe they can afford to stay home longer, which, hey, good for them. And hey, and this is where I kind of cross the line with the parties and everything a little bit. Some here, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I'm somebody who absolutely believes that minimum wage should be more than $7 an hour. It was $7 an hour years and years and years ago, and inflation has been insane. So yeah, it doesn't have the buying power that it did before, and it should be increasing with inflation, just like most of our jobs do as well. So I'm a big advocate for that, sure. But even more so, if jobs are having a hard time hiring, to Biden and the Democrats' point is that these CEOs and these top execs are making so much money, they can totally take a cut in pay, or the company itself can take a cut in their overall surplus of profits to pay people more. And if you pay people more, you traditionally get more workers, better workers, and your overall productivity increases. So, I'm a big advocate for that too. Yeah. If you're running a business and you can't afford to hire anybody because they can stay home and make more money, or live a more enjoyable life that way, maybe you can reevaluate how you're doing things. Now, I understand that hurts mom and pop stores more, but companies like Amazon, like I know those guys are doing, I think, $15 an hour starting out. There's a Buc-ee's that opened up not too far from me. If you don't know what a Buc-ee's is, huge gas station that apparently people are always at, even if there's like 100 and something pumps. There's always a ton of people there. They get great brisket too. Great brisket. But I saw signs they were like hiring at $15 an hour and up. So there's places that are doing that. There's plenty of places you can go and get a good, especially now that some of them are really, really trying to get some people hired. But there's others that aren't. And I really think that employers are missing out by not offering, whether it's more pay right off the bat or better training or even some college or additional educational opportunities or something like that. There's so many ways that they can come up with things. I mean, if you were a company and all you did was invest it into like a little babysitting side project company and could provide childcare, for free to the people that were working for you, and then you're paying for the space, you're paying for a couple people to watch them that are certified and everything. There's a ton of people that would join the workforce because childcare is expensive. And I think I've got a clip of him saying at some point, but he does speak to childcare in the State of the Union address. So again, I know I teeter-totter between, left and right and up and down and whatever. I think a lot of us do if we're honest about it. But yeah, there's a lot of people that aren't going back to work. They have no desire to go back to work. So I don't think that lowering wages or lowering, prices is the ultimate answer. I mean, I would love for prices to get lower, but I think lowering the inflation rates, I think working with, the Federal Reserve, figure out how we can lower inflation rates all in all, or put incentives out there for people to start their own businesses. I'm a big advocate for that too. I think there should be significantly more incentives out there for people to start their own businesses. Mom and pop stores, these little small box shops. It's the heartbeat of America. It's what gets us going. So I definitely think that there should be a lot more incentives out there for that. I think that you get a lot more people working that way. And I think the economy just improves that way. But, what do I know? Let's watch some more.
Economists call this increasing the productive capacity of our economy. I call it building a better America.
So I really hate to do it again, but building a better America, with everything that he's talking about and the way that's worded, sounds an awful lot like someone else saying something very similar.
Together, we will make America strong again. We will make America wealthy again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And yes, together, we will make America great again.
I think they're basically the same thing. What else? What else, Chad?
And here's the plan. First, cut the cost of prescription drugs. We pay more for the same drug produced by the same company in America than any other country in the world.
Amen. I'm with you on that. Again, I agree with Joe Biden. I agree with Joe Biden so much. Okay, well, I agree with Joe Biden and Trump. Let's take a look. So from NPR, Trump signs new executive order on prescription drug prices. President Trump signed an executive order Sunday that he says lowers prescription drug prices by putting America first, but experts said the move is unlikely to have any immediate impact. The action comes nearly 2 months after the president signed a different executive order with the exact same name, but held it back to see if he can negotiate a better deal with drug companies. If these talks are successful, we may not need to implement the fourth executive order, which is a very tough order for them, Trump said at the time. So lowering drug costs seems to be something across the board that everyone can get behind, right? Again, this is something that is highly supported by both parties, but one party just did not like it when it came out of this guy's mouth. For whatever reason, that orangish glow that he had, I guess, just really made everything he said sound awful. He's saying the same thing. Okay. And again, I'm not the biggest Trump supporter out there. I'm really not. But you got to call out the hypocrisy when you see it, right? How do you praise somebody for saying something and then denigrate and go after someone else for saying the exact same thing just because they're in a different political party. That makes any sense.
And while you're at it, confirm my nominees for the Federal Reserve, which plays a critical role in fighting inflation.
All right. So again, they're impressed that he understands that inflation has a direct correlation with the Federal Reserve. When he said that, I didn't quite understand what he meant by, approving his nominee. So I had to do a little digging. Of course, everybody that was on the left in media was bashing the Republicans for not just instantly voting in this person that he's got nominated. We'll take a look here. And I hate to consistently go back to media that's leans to the right, excuse me. But I do always try to use sources that go to the left, to the right, in the middle, all over the place. So this was the best one that I could find for this. Again, all the other ones seem to not only just say what was going on, but they took an objective role to bash him or bash the, not him, but bash the GOP for not voting in the nominee. So here on Fox Business, it says Republicans to boycott committee vote on Biden Fed nominees. Boycotting targeting Sarah Bloom Raskin over ethics concerns could also affect Jerome Powell's renomination. Republicans are expected to boycott a Senate Banking Committee meeting Tuesday afternoon as they level ethics allegations at one of President Biden's Federal Reserve nominees, which Democrats say are baseless and unfair. Republicans are accusing Fed Vice Chair of Supervision nominee Sarah Bloom Raskin of influence peddling after leaving a post in the Obama administration. Raskin, the White House, the Kansas City Fed, the company she's accused of using her influence to assist all strenuous deny the allegation. That's a weird put together sentence there. Boycott could blah, 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 blah. Committee Republicans are seeking to delay her vote. We're seeking answers, Banking Committee ranking member Pat Toomey, Republican out of Pennsylvania, said Tuesday. Until basic questions have been adequately addressed, I do not think the committee should proceed with a vote on Miss Raskin. I saw some videos of her answering questions, and like most people that are nominated to roles, she didn't actually answer any questions and kind of skipped around the answer, so to speak. And I could be wrong on that, but I want to say I did see that. But here's what I'm getting out of this. So they're wanting to not vote against her, right? But to delay the vote, we're seeking answers, is what they're saying. So oftentimes, a big gripe I have, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, again, point back to her, she made a very good point, as several others have as well. But, I'll point to her because I've used videos of her in the past, and again from Timcast. But she made the point that there's these huge bills that are coming to Congress, and people aren't reading them. They aren't reading them. They don't know what's in there. Somebody else is telling them, and they're voting for it. I think that's absolutely absurd. That's just bad business, right? Well, so is this. We're just going to elect somebody without actually taking the time to ask the questions and make sure that somebody getting into a major role with the Federal Reserve that impacts the entire economical structure of our country, right? If we can't take the time to talk to somebody like that and be comfortable about it, I don't know if the Republicans are playing games or not. I don't know enough about this particular topic. But if all they're doing is trying to go through asking the questions and getting their answers and taking their time, I see no difference between that and what the Democrats did with Kavanaugh or Amy Coney Barrett, where they just really drug on the confirmations for them to the Supreme Court and asked plenty of questions during that time. So again, if the Republicans are being genuine here, I'm all behind it 100%. If they're playing games, I do hate playing games from either side. It's ultimately wasting time, wasting our tax dollars. And there's so many more constructive things that could be done instead of playing games. But again, I'm going to err on the side that they are probably being legit. And this is one of those things that's just typically rushed through, and they're taking their time and asking questions, especially with ties to, who was it? Obama and some other, potential, issues, that some allegations that are arising there. So, hey, props off to them for taking the time and actually trying to do something right. But let's go ahead and watch a little bit more. We're almost done, guys. If you watched this far, thank you so much, and I hope you're getting something out of it. If you are, make sure you like the video, subscribe if you hadn't already. Leave a comment if you want to, especially if you don't like the video and you have a problem with me or my face or anything like that. Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear all about it. But I think one of the best things you can do, absolute 100%, is to share the video. Share it on your social media and say, hey guys, here's a great breakdown of the State of the Union address. The more people that see it, that's ultimately my goal. Is not to get rich off of YouTube or any of these other platforms. It's to get the word out there, get my perspective of, what's going on in the world. And I'm doing that through articles. I'm doing that through research. I'm doing that through, the videos that are popping up on the mainstream media and kind of dissecting them a little bit. And again, looking at it from my worldview, my perspective, and just bringing that to you, as most content creators do. But again, like the independent content creators that I roll with, unlike mainstream media, we are almost always transparent with everything. So again, all the links that I'm using will be down in the description below. If you have any questions about anything that I've said, if I can remember it, I will reply if you want to leave a comment below. But let's go ahead and watch a little bit more. Thanks for sticking around, guys. I know this is long.
My plan will not only lower costs and give families a fair shot, it will lower the deficit. The previous administration not only ballooned the deficit with those tax cuts for the very wealthy and corporations, it undermined the watchdogs, the job of those to keep pandemic relief funds being wasted. Remember we had those debates about whether or not those watchdogs should be able to see every day how much money was being spent, where was it going to the right place? But in my administration, the watchdogs are back.
All right, so this is where I got to get a little ugly. Joe, where were the watchdogs when you were VP and playing around with $1 billion of taxpayer money for your alleged own benefit, really? And we talked about this before with Burisma and Ukraine and, Hunter. But, where were the watchdogs then when you openly admitted, and we do have it, I'm going to play it now, where you openly admitted to a quid pro quo with the Ukraine, whoever, people over there. The same thing that Trump was accused of, you openly admitted to.
And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
Quid pro Joe. Let's take a look at the Hill. It says Biden is dead wrong about the Trump tax cuts, spending, and debt. While pushing his budget-busting economic agenda, President Biden tried to claim the mantle for fiscal responsibility, stating this isn't going to be anything like my predecessor, whose unpaid tax cuts and other spending added nearly $8 trillion in his first 4 years to the national debt. $8 trillion. Let's look at this. First, let's get the facts straight. In just 8 years, the Obama-Biden administration oversaw federal debt outstanding increase from $10.7 trillion to nearly $20 trillion, a pace of more than 4% of GDP per year in an annual deficit. Their debt increase was nearly equivalent to all the federal debt accumulated over the entire history of our country that preceded their administration. 3 years into Donald Trump's administration, just prior to the onset of the pandemic, the national debt stood at $23.2 trillion. Equivalent to 106.9% of GDP. Because of the stronger economic growth America was then realizing, debt as a percentage of GDP was increasing at just 0.5% per year. During 2020, federal debt rose $4.5 trillion. The bulk of the deficit came from the significant federal assistance provided to support the economy during the pandemic-related recession, the deepest economic shock to our country in nearly a century. Would Biden have spent less? Where does it say it? I don't think I skipped over it. But yeah. So when he was, the vice president, they had a much more significant increase, and they did not have the pandemic to deal with. So, where are you getting your numbers, Joe? Where are you getting your numbers? Let's watch some more.
But I also know this, because of the progress we've made, because of your resilience and the tools that we have been provided by this Congress, tonight I can say we're moving forward safely back to more normal routines. We've reached a new moment in the fight against COVID-19, where severe cases are down to a level not seen since July of last year. Just a few days ago, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention issued a new mask guidelines. Under the new guidelines, most Americans and most of the country can now go mask-free.
All right, we saw those numbers earlier. Let's just keep going.
Stay protected with vaccines and treatments. We know how incredibly effective vaccines are. If you're vaccinated and boosted, you have the highest degree of protection. And we'll never give up on vaccinating more Americans. We'll continue vaccinating the world. We've sent 475 million vaccine doses to 112 countries, more than any nation on earth. We won't stop because you can't build a wall high enough to keep out a vaccine. The vaccine can stop the spread of these diseases.
All right, first, I don't understand the wall metaphor. If somebody understands what he's trying to say by that, put it in the comments below. I would love to hear your opinion on it. I didn't get it at all. He said they know the effectiveness of the vaccines. I doubt it. Let's take a look again at something, because they were talking, and I don't have it in this clip, but they were talking about how, they're working to get children vaccinated and, children 5 years and under and all these statistics and stuff. Well, they don't actually use the actual statistics. Let's take a look real quick. So right here from CNBC, Pfizer COVID vaccine was just 12% effective against Omicron in kids 5 to 11, study finds. The dramatic drop in vaccine effectiveness was likely due to the lower dosage the youngsters received, according to the study team members. But there's plenty of articles out there where it does show that the effectiveness for Omicron with the vaccines for adults is low as well. So they can use all the jargon they want and the sway on it or whatever, but the vaccines are just not working against Omicron. In fact, we've done a couple of shows on that where we really dug into it deep. An Israel study I know we talked about before, it's just not working on it. So the idea that they continue to push the vaccines is interesting to me, right? And mandates and stuff, we talked about that before too. Like, why are you pushing it when you know it doesn't work? Who is the God that you were serving for this? Because it doesn't make any sense, right? Furthermore, the Pfizer vaccines, the Moderna, whatever, these are not free. They're getting paid. They're getting paid with our taxpayer dollars. So when he says that they not only, they used our taxpayer dollars funding these vaccines to send 475 million vaccine doses all over the world. Vaccines that are not effective against Omicron. Barely effective. Let me say that. Barely effective. But they're sending 475 million doses all over the world at our expense, right? And they're not even going to do anything. Those vaccines don't really even accomplish anything. It's a total misuse of funds, total misuse of this whole pandemic thing. Do they know the numbers? Do they know the statistics? Do they know the effectiveness? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. Either no, they don't know, and that's why they keep pushing like they are, or yes, they do know and they're lying to you.
We should all agree the answer is not to defund the police. It's to fund the police. Fund them. Fund them.
Wow, what a reaction. That's not something I expected to hear from the left, to actually fund the police. There's a lot of people that disagree with him on the left. So, I mean, I got to give him props for doing that. And he's been fairly consistent. Check this out.
As the debate over whether to defund police departments nationwide intensifies, President Trump is making it clear he is opposed to the idea.
There won't be defunding. There won't be dismantling of our police.
The president is also trying to cast Democrats who support efforts to defund police departments as anti-law enforcement and radical. Several cities across the country are already considering it in some form, including the two biggest cities in the U.S. New York City's mayor changing course, now vowing to cut the police department budget. In Los Angeles, the mayor says he's looking to redirect millions of dollars away from policing. But the presumptive Democratic nominee, Joe Biden, saying overnight he is also against it.
No, I don't support defunding the police. I support conditioning federal aid to police based on whether or not they meet certain basic standards of decency and honorableness and in fact, are able to demonstrate they can protect the community and everybody in the community.
Love him or hate him, you got to give the man props for being consistent. Okay? Now, he's wavered back and forth on other things, but on this one, he seems to be fairly consistent. So, hey, props for that. Rand Paul and Ron Paul, his father. I mean, these are guys that have been like so consistent in their ideology for so long without wavering. I just love that. I think that's great. I always do feel like, though, there is room for growth, not to be swayed and manipulated, but growth, genuine growth. Okay. But, yeah, props to him for staying consistent. You go, Joe.
Folks, if we are to advance liberty and justice, we need to secure our border and fix the immigration system.
Wait, what did he say?
Folks, if we are to advance liberty and justice, we need to secure our border and fix the immigration system.
Now, that doesn't sound right. That sounds like something they've been against for so long now. Even Nancy and Kamala were giving it a standing O. That's awesome. But I feel like we've heard this fairly recently before, and it did not get the reception that that President Biden just got.
Now is the time for Congress to show the world that America is committed to ending illegal immigration and putting the ruthless coyotes, cartels, drug dealers, and human traffickers out of business.
See what I mean? Why didn't Nancy stand? Why was Kamala looking so nasty over there, like mean mugging and everything? Why can't she stand behind that like she did when Biden said it? What's the difference? It's the same message, right? I mean, a lot of people were sitting, Schumer was sitting down. Why wouldn't we want to secure our borders? And for so long, you know, Trump wanted to build the wall. He wanted funding for the wall. He wanted to secure the borders, and everyone attacked him for that. Yet everyone, even the Republicans, are giving Biden a standing O on this one because everyone legitimately agrees that we have to secure our borders. Republicans have been saying it forever. Democrats say it when it's convenient, apparently, or when midterm season's upon us. If you hadn't gotten it by now, a lot of the shift in messaging is happening because midterm season is upon us. Polls are not reflecting well for the Democratic Party, and specifically Biden and Kamala. Both are just absolutely dreadful in polls, and we'll look at one of those before I let you guys go. But it's a real thing. They are saying the same things that Trump did, and they could not stand him for that. Let's watch some more.
I believe that we have a sacred obligation to equip those we send to war and care for those and their family when they come home. My administration is providing assistance in job training, housing, and now helping lower-income veterans get VA care debt-free. And our troops in Iraq and Afghanistan have faced many dangers, one being stationed at bases breathing in toxic smoke from burn pits. Many of you have been there.
All right, what the hell was Nancy doing? What is this? That wasn't even a moment for applause. He was saying something terrible, that people were near burn pits of toxic fumes and could have gotten sick. Is she always drunk? I don't get it. Yeah, that wasn't even a plausible moment. All right, got one more clip for you guys. I promise. One more clip.
Our 245th year as a nation, I've come to report on the state of the nation, the State of the Union. And my report is this: the State of the Union is strong because you, the American people, are strong. We are stronger today. We are stronger today than we were a year ago. And we'll be stronger a year from now than we are today. This is our moment to meet and overcome the challenges of our time. And we will, as one people, one America, the United States of America. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you. Go get him.
I'm not sure I totally agree with how great the state of our union is right now. I think we're probably more divided than we've been in a long time. Obviously not ever, but in a long time, you know, in my lifetime, we've seen that we continue to be divided, and a lot of it is by party lines, and a lot of it is manipulation by the media. But yeah, is the State of the Union good? That's subjective, I think. But what happened right there at the end? God bless our troops and go get them. He didn't say God bless America. He said God bless our troops, or God be with our troops, however he said it, and then go get him. Did he change at the last minute what he was, where he thought he was? Was this a pep rally for the military to go out there and do something? So that seemed a little off for me, you know, a weird way to end it. Far be it for me, you know, to say how the president should end the State of the Union address, but that just seemed kind of odd. That was the last video clip. No more. Do have the last couple little write-ups real quick we'll go through. Thank you again for sticking with me this long. I know it's a long video, and again, I don't know how or if I'll be able to clip this down into smaller segments, so thank you for watching. I hope you are enjoying it. I hope you're getting something out of it. Not to sound too repetitive, but remember, again, any of the links I use are in the show notes below, so you can always go behind me. If you like the video, if you like what I'm doing, hit that like button, subscribe, share it, and then, like I said, leave comments if you want to. But you know, the idea is to share it and get this message out there to more and more people. So let's check out this write-up. I think this was a terrific write-up. These are not my words. This is an opinion piece, but this is very well written, and I will kind of shoot through it as best I can. So from the New York Post, says Biden's unserious State of the Union. It takes a special sort of political cynicism to publicly thank the Ukrainian ambassador for her nation's bravery, and stress in the next moment that we will do nothing to defend her country with our military. But then President Biden's State of the Union speech was nothing but bumbling hypocrisy. Start with the fact that the mask mandate Nancy Pelosi lorded over her members for years was suddenly lifted the day before the speech, showing that follow the science was a bald-faced lie. Next up, Biden begging for unity, then accusing Republicans of only helping the rich. It was quite the performance. After years of bashing Donald Trump, Biden stole his stump speech. He branded Build Back Better as a Build a Better America and got cheap applause from claiming he was going to get businesses to stay in the U.S. This after Democratic administrations have signed trade deal after trade deal with that have taken industries to China and Mexico. But you think that companies will be happy to stay after Biden blamed them for inflation, claiming that rising costs in stores were because of gouging, not supply issues and his own reckless government spending, or that he's instituting a crackdown on prices. Corporations will long for the friendlier shores of, if we don't know, Venezuela. Turns out Buy American was just a talking horse for Biden's real agenda, trying to get the massive social spending of Build Back Better passed. He's nothing if not consistent in his futility, even though Joe Manchin has shot him down again and again and again. So the state of Biden's union is delusional because he's not going to be able to lower prices. He's not going to be able to pass BBB. He's not going to be able to keep companies in America, won't get an immigration deal, certainly not when he's thrown open the border to millions. No amount of lecturing will change that. Meanwhile, nothing on energy independence, which would help our economy and strengthen our foreign relationships. We talked about that. Meanwhile, old doddering Joe said he stood with Iranian, not Ukrainian people, and assured everyone we wouldn't be fighting Ukraine, not Russia. All while Pelosi rubbed her hands together behind him like she was Cruella de Vil eyeing a puppy. Then, just because he hadn't gaslit America enough, he insisted we should fund the police after Democrats used defund the police as a rallying cry for more than a year. Does he really think anyone will believe that the party that caused crime nationwide to skyrocket is the party of law and order? Joe's plans boiled down to nothing more than just get it done, a phrase he said about 153 times. Pass my bills, just get it done. Cure cancer, just get it done. None of it will get done. It was unserious speech for deadly serious times. Lord help us. Who wrote this? By the editorial board. You know what? That was very well put together and completely justified everything that they were saying there. And a lot of it, of course, we covered, but wow, that was really, really well written. And again, the link for that will be in the description below. If you want to share that around a little bit too, it wouldn't be a bad idea. But one of the big questions is how is Biden's ratings, especially after the State of the Union address. I haven't really seen a whole lot of updates out there. This is the site that I found that has the most up to date right here. So this was last update on March 3rd, which was after the State of the Union address. And it does show Joe at a 52.9% disapproval rating, a 41.6% approval rating. Now that is the average. And here are all the different, you got your Rasmussen, your whatever, all these different polls. So approval, disapproval, adjusted, yada, yada, yada. But it ain't looking good. Down here at the bottom, it's got some graphs you can go to and hover over. It gives some cool information. This is from 538. And again, the link for that will be below. Here's kind of a blown up little screenshot of this, just showing where Biden compares to the last, 6 or 9 I got in the screenshot, I think. Let's see. Yeah. So 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So 9. So if you can see where I'm hovering over it, that's the kind of the last point that I can kind of get to where Biden still shows up. So if I'm not mistaken, Trump is the only one that was polling less than Biden at this point. But of course, the media just went after Trump nonstop, bashed him nonstop. The mass majority of the media coverage of Trump was negative even when he was doing positive things. Whereas the majority of the media coverage for Joe Biden has been positive, or at least it was. But now even the media is saying, well, you can't really cover for him anymore. And so now things are starting to get called out and come to light. So, good on them for that. But yeah, polling's not doing too good. So it would kind of justify why there was that shift in a lot of the ideology that he was talking about, a lot of what he was supporting. Again, he was consistent on some things, props for that. But I think he sees the writing on the wall and had to make some adjustments. The Democratic Party as a whole, I think, is seeing that and making some adjustments. And they should, because again, we're not a Democrat country. We're not a Republican country. We're, a Democratic Republic or a whatever. And we've got to find that middle ground. There has to be that, let me give up a little bit to meet you halfway and let's find, common ground. They're not trying to do that, of course, but that's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what they need to get back to. So, good on them for giving up some ground. I hope they continue with it. The last couple of thoughts. Remember, it is midterm season. Okay. So, if you like the direction that the country's going in, awesome. Continue to vote for the people that are in office now. And I chuckle because I don't know too many people that are happy with the way we're going. If you are unhappy with the way we're going, vote them out. Whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, whether you're a Republican, whatever, man, if they are in office and they are not doing anything, get them out. As I always say, there's plenty of resources available for you to start finding out what offices are up for election in your area, who has already said that they're running for election in your area, and start researching them, whether it's for Senate or Congress or whether it's local. Everything counts right now. You really need to be looking into that and finding out who you're going to vote for and who you're going to kick out. Okay? So, look, hey, I think the State of the Union is kind of rocky. Okay? I think I'm pretty clear on that in my assumption. But the good news is, here's the great news. It can be fixed. It's going to take us, not them, us. We have to fix it. Between going to polls and voting, between protesting, between boycotting, between writing letters, whatever it takes, we have to be the voice of America, because America is we the people. They work for us, not the other way around. Look into who's running for office, get out there and vote. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for sticking around.
Some people think I'm high on stage. I would never get high before a show, because when I'm high, I don't want to stand in front of a bunch of people that I don't know. That does not sound comfortable. Like when you're high and a joke doesn't work, it's extra scary. It's like, whoa, what the hell happened there? I am retreating within myself. Why have all these people gathered? And why am I elevated? Why am I not facing the same way as everyone else? And what is this electric stick in my hand? I like the way this is situated here. It seems like you guys were chasing me, closing in, then said, "F it, let's sit down."